end and beginning of your intro. And
yeah,
I love it. It's we are children of God. The stuff of spirit swirls around within us. We are coming, and I think you said it somewhere else, like about our stories.
I said it it was the first thing and the last.
Yeah,
I said it. Yeah, I didn't know if anyone would even notice. I obviously,
I have to tell you, like, I love the way you wrote. Well, so I read your book, and then I went and was like, I'm going to Instagram stalk her for a second. And so, like, I love the way you wrote it. And then I was listening to you read it again on audio last night, and I was like, you write it like a poem when I hear you speak it. Like when I hear the words flow, I was like, oh, she's really poetic. Like it has a really good flow.
Oh my gosh. I'm going to start crying right now.
It has a really
do you know who your voice reminds me of? Your writing style. Do you know the book Braiding Sweetgrass?
Oh my gosh. Are you serious?
No, yeah.
That is
Robin Wall Kimmerer. I love her. Like I'm obsessed with her. But there's a style that rhythm that it feels just very connected to the earth that I heard, because I listened to your book on audio and that's what I heard. I'm like, oh, she reminds me of Robin Wall Kimmerer. Yeah, I
always tell people, like, that book Braiding Sweetgrass is like, it's not a book. It's like you're like you're like beholding art. Like it's so beautiful, and I can't even describe it. It feels like it's in this other category, and I definitely don't feel like, I mean, that's just like the best compliment I've ever received. Just say, welcome to Motherland. Okay. Welcome to Motherland.
Yay. All right, guys. So today our guest is Aurelia Pratt of Brown Girls Epiphany. Reclaim your intuition and step into your power. She is a pastor, writer, I love it, but sacred spacemaker who finds joy in helping people live into the fullness of their God-given divine image. And she's the lead pastor as well as the founder of Peace of Christ Church in Round Rock, Texas. And as you have your podcast too, yes?
Yes, we've been on a little bit of a hiatus, but we're just moving on our own timeline. You know what I'm saying?
That's right.
That's perfect.
But yes, Nuance Tea, and we just got our LLC last year, and we're getting ready to like record a second season.
Yay, that's awesome. I have not had a chance to listen, but I really, really need to go listen.
Y'all have to connect with Brittany because she's awesome.
Is that that's your co-host?
That's my co-host, yeah.
Yay. Okay, we'll have to look her up. I want to read, you guys that are listening, a little paragraph, and it says, I love this. This was at like I said, a beginning, ending of your intro. And it says, we are children of God. The stuff of spirit swirls around within us. We are culminations of our ancestors' stories. We are story bearers. Our existence is holy, and our healing is their healing too. For those who came before us, for all who will come after, and yes, even for ourselves, may it be so. And I loved your story. I think we are, let's just dive into it. So tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll just mosey on through the conversation.
Ooh, okay. Well, I don't know what to say. I live in Texas. I'm from Louisiana, so I've just pretty much grown up in the South. I have a partner, husband of almost 16 years and a 7-year-old daughter. And I work at a church as my profession. I helped found the church about 10 years ago. And on the side, I love to just write and kind of do my own creative work through poetry. You know, we created the podcast just for our own fun creative endeavors. And I don't know, like just be in relationship. I think I expend a lot of emotional energy in my job. And so when I'm not expending emotional energy, I'm usually just trying to find rest and joy in my own whatever I want to do.
Yeah. One of the things that I love on your book is how you talk about, and I want to ask you this question, so I'm going to say something and then ask you a question, but I love how you talk about like decolonizing and breaking down your own, like seeing your religion, your spirituality in a different way from, you know, this is the way I was brought up, and then this is what I had to navigate through to find, you know, what I believe in, how things are. And you talk a lot about, well, you mentioned a couple times the Imago Dei. Did I say it correctly?
Imago Dei.
Imago Dei. Thank you. And you mentioned the Imago Dei, and you just talk about that a little bit. So with bringing in the whole thought of like, this is how Christianity was kind of taught to me, and then the way that I had to start viewing it through my own, you know, my own color of my skin and my own eyes. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And then like what guided you into like creating a church is huge. That's a huge, like founding a church, that's big.
Yeah, and there's been so many evolutions and deaths and rebirths along the way. And so I hold, you know, that task lightly, but it has been a huge part of my journey. You know, I grew up in the Christian tradition, and I always say, like, this is my tradition. You know, I don't know, maybe I chose it, maybe I inherited it, but this is the tradition I've kind of chosen to set up shop in. I see a lot of beauty in it. There's a part of me that is just kind of a loyal soul. I'm loyal to my friends. You know, I just value that in some ways, and that's kind of how I navigate life sometimes. And so I see beauty in this tradition, and I also see that there's a lot of harm in it. Some people have to, you know, they need to get out of that tradition for their own healing and health. And I never, you know, I've never judged people for that. And in fact, in my church, in my community, there are a lot of people who find us and they find liberation and they find healing, and then they, you know, they got to go because they realize like this is not Christianity, like this is not the context for me. It's too triggering. It's too much, even in a healthy space. So I always understand that, and then for me, I just feel like, you know, this tradition exists, like it's here whether I stay in it or not, and there is a lot of harm in it. And so if I can see the beauty and have the energy to be here, then, you know, I want to be here and try and create healthy spaces where we're, you know, having healthy images of God, healthy theology, healthy ways of being in sacred community. And so that's kind of where I am now, but I never feel threatened or anything by other, you know, traditions or other ways of engaging divine connection, divine presence. This just so happens to be where I find joy and meaning in my tradition. So I'm not sure if that makes sense or if I'm answering what you asked me, but I think it helps kind of frame the conversation from, you know, where I'm coming from.
Yeah. That I thought that was an amazing answer. I think one of the things that really resonate there, I mean, your entire story, I felt really resonated with me from just a lot of experiences that you had around your image being reflected back to you through a white gaze, and your journey to sort of reclaim, you know, how you see yourself and the relationship that you have with yourself, I thought was powerful. But one of the most powerful things that I've been talking a lot about lately was your conversation around niceness and polite society. You know, I don't know if you've heard it. I can't remember now, and I'll find it so we can put it in the show notes. But there's been a conversation around the characteristics of white supremacy, like the 8 riding characteristics of white supremacy, and some of them are like right to no conflict, sense of urgency, perfectionism, worship of the written word. But that idea of politeness and niceness really resonated with me because I think that we are always focused on being nice, but not kind. And when you were talking about this idea of confronting what does it mean to be polite and where does that come from, especially in the South, right?
Yeah.
This idea of politeness. I talk a lot about you don't have to like people in order to love them. And I think it is really powerful that you were talking about this, how when you push back and how it's pushed back on you. And can you talk a little bit more about shedding the idea of politeness? I thought a lot of what Cornel West says, that justice is what love looks like in public. And I think what you talk about when you're talking about politeness is that sense of justice.
Yeah. In the book, I try to write a book that can speak to anyone who's a person of faith, which I feel excited talking to you all, because that tells me yes, I completed the assignment, while also knowing that most people that read this book and that get their hands on it are probably from a Christian background or in that kind of context. So I really wanted to talk about politeness because it is used to put a bow on racism, especially in the church. We can't talk about white supremacy and the realities of how, people of color, Black people, Indigenous people are affected by white supremacy in the church, because then we're not being peacemakers. And so I wanted to call that out and confront that, talk about how that impacted me personally, but just because I think people connect with stories, and so if you can hear a story, then you can kind of digest these concepts better. So I tried to give some personal stories, but I also just wanted to talk about it through, through kind of like a Christian lens of the fruits of the Spirit, which we're always told to be, be kind, be loving, be peaceful. There's this whole list in the Bible of self-control. There's a whole list of what defines a person who has the Spirit in them. And so often that's used to keep people from speaking truth, from keeping people of color from sharing their real experiences. And of course, we've probably all, as women of color, experienced using that against us when we are trying to share our real experiences. And so I tried to redefine those concepts and from in a liberative framework, and to say kindness is actually caring about our neighbor and then doing something about it. Self-control is I don't remember what I said in the book, but what comes to mind right now is being able to bear witness to other people's pain without being so reactionary or defensive. So things like that. And that I call it white and polite, but it's a thing.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like what you're talking about, and I didn't grow up Christianity or with
I know. I listened to your first 2 episodes.
Oh yeah. I feel like I'm sometimes the only Black person who never went to church regularly, which I think gives me an advantage of some ways too. As I became a seeker, sort of looking for different things. But I really loved this book because it felt like it was an open invitation for anybody. I related to it, and I didn't grow up in the church. And I didn't just relate to your stories about growing up in sort of a predominantly white culture, which I did as well, but just your journey of faith and spirit really resonated with me. And I think that's really powerful. And your conversation about non-duality coming from a woman who's a pastor blew me away, because that is not something you hear people talk about. Can you talk about that a little bit? Non-duality, as somebody who's rooted in yogic and Buddhist traditions, that's something we talk about all the time.
Yeah. We take comfort. There's a lot of us out there in my world who are trying to live with that non-dualistic posture. We call ourselves in my church paradox people. We want to be people who are comfortable in the both and comfortable in the liminal spaces. He's actually a priest, Father Richard Rohr, and I don't quote very many people in my book, which I feel like this is just an aside, but I feel like when you don't have a long reference list, you get less respect in the book world. And that was on purpose, though. This was a book about intuition, and it was very intentional. So the fact that I quoted him was like, I really wanted people to get this. I love how he defines non-dualism, but just basically talking about how, we are people who are comfortable in the black and white. We're comfortable in the binary. And yes, that may be great for science. That may be great for math. But when it comes to the things of God and it comes to love and relationships, we need to be people who don't operate in the extreme and who are okay being in, mystery. And I don't think that we can't do it. I just think that our muscles aren't strong yet, and we need to work that out more. And I think faith spaces don't offer space for that. Because it's not mass packageable. You can't give everyone a formula, because most churches are businesses, right? And they have a payroll. And if you can't give people a checklist and a formula, which is what feels really good for dualistic thinking, then, they're probably not going to come back, because people like their check boxes.
Yeah.
And so we're a small church and probably always will be, because we're trying to live in the paradox. We're trying to embody non-dualism.
I love that.
Yeah. So I think that's like chapter 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really struck me, though, because that idea of paradox, though, carries itself all the way through.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I talk about, I think I have a chapter on mystery toward the end, and talk about it there. Yeah.
Yeah. I love, so for when I read the book, growing up, I was raised in a completely Christian household. My grandfather and parents were Catholic. My mom was Christian. So I grew up in the both of them, right? And so I really understand when you were talking about wait, but this isn't bad, but you're telling me it's bad. And I'm confused on, my own belief system of where Catholicism and Christianity, right? We all heard the whole Catholics aren't Christians talk. I mean, I've heard that for I don't know how long. But one of the things too is, and I really felt like I saw myself on so many layers of you, because I was also raised by the grandfather that didn't speak Spanish, because he fought so hard to be a part of his society that he was like, I don't want to bring this in, and trying to define where that defines me as, what it looks like. I've heard it all. But I love your, how you talk about the image of God and saying how we're created in this and who that is. Because one of the things that I've done, being and teaching women the Bible, is always when I talk about the image of God, I'm like, if you guys take the time to study the actual term, Greek interpretation of the image of God, it's like, if I took an exact copy of you, the spitting exact copy is what the word image means. So I love that you brought that in, because I was like, all these things that we go through with Christian, thoughts, and the way that we talk about how unworthy we are, and the way that we speak down to ourselves at times, it's like, but he literally calls us the exact copy. Come on, let's break that down. And then I love how you brought in there in the sense that was you said it in the sense that I had to go back into, I have it somewhere highlighted. Oh, here it is. Embracing my brownness has been the most crucial step I could take toward my healing. And I was like, yes, all of that. Yes. Yeah. And it's just, I don't know. I think you came through with so much fire in this, in bringing in everything, right? Was it, like you said, going in, becoming a mother, and having Donald Trump as president, just coming into the world in that way, and looking at this is an opportunity, that you were thinking that people were going to finally talk in a way about racism and spirit and Christian spirituality. And it didn't happen like that. I don't think it happened like that.
No, it did not.
I don't think it happened like that. But yeah, I don't know. I was really excited about everything. So I'm saying this to to the listeners, if you haven't read this, you guys, and you're a person of color that was raised or not raised, like you're saying, Oneika, in religion, this book definitely brings a lot of, just remembering. I don't know what to say. I'm kind of like, it's like,
it's a remembering.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. I think it is the idea to remember to remember. I think it is, it's a calling back and a calling forward of just that there is something more. And even if you don't have a name for what that thing is yet, just the idea that something gets stirred up. And I think that's really potent. The idea that, even your conversation around shame, I thought was also really potent. About shame and you were talking about confronting shame and letting it sort of fall away. But I love having conversations about shame, because shame can be a remembering. It can trigger us to go back and say, no, I am not feeling good about this narrative that's being projected on me, because I know somewhere in my DNA, in my ancestry, that this is not true. Yeah. And then I'm feeling this, not just to feel bad about myself, but it's calling me back to a place where I know that this is not who I am. And so that's why I think that shame and this idea of accepting our wholeness is really powerful, right? That our shame can keep us safe sometimes too, right? It's also helpful. But when it's projected on us from a gaze that's not ours, it is a way for us to go back to who we are. And I think that's a really powerful calling back.
Yeah. I think that there's like a couple of different themes in the book, and one of them is obviously identity. And I do think, I wasn't sure while I was writing, speaking of the end of the last episode, you were talking about imposter syndrome. While I was writing, like, I'm probably crazy, this is probably just me, but like, it just felt so vulnerable to share these things, not knowing if other people would relate. Especially like being in predominantly white contexts where I don't have everyday like validation of other people, of color saying like, yes, this is my experience. I mean, of course I have some of that, but not in like my day-to-day life all the time. And so I'm putting this out here, and what I'm putting out here is microaggressions. I'm not sharing trauma porn. I mean, I didn't share my deepest, worst experiences because honestly, those came from family members and close friends. And I didn't share like, the worst of the worst, because that wasn't the point. The point was to share how everyday microaggressions add up and seep into your soul and impact your life. But then that's not just what the book is about. The book is about the groundedness of remembering who you are, and the groundedness of the truth of what I call, what I talk about as Imago Dei.
So what has the response been? What kinds of things are you hearing?
Well, okay. So let me just say, I've mostly had a positive experience. The whole book writing journey was wonderful. The publisher was pretty great. Like they didn't change anything. They didn't change my title, my subtitle. I chose my subtitle. Like my experience with my editor was great. I really felt like I had all the autonomy, and just like good energy the whole way. I got to record the audiobook and all these opportunities. And then the big thing that I was like, I'm going to manifest this. I was like, I am going to put all my energy toward like getting a review for Publishers Weekly, because if Publishers Weekly gives me a review, like it'll just everything, like the opportunities, it'll just exponentially, put the book out there. And I was like reading all these reviews and like I was like putting energy toward this. And anyway, I always say like, I was like, I manifested a review from Publishers Weekly. I just forgot to manifest a good review.
Oh no.
Oh no.
So I cannot tell y'all, like, you'll have to go look it up. It is like such a scathing review.
I have to tell you though, I worked in the book business for over 20 years. Tell you FPW, because they are a nonsense publication. I'm saying that as a bookseller. I'm saying that as somebody who's writing a book right now, who's trying to get a book deal. And I'm sorry that happened to you, but yeah.
Well, it just because I know that they use like contractors to review them, and I could have just gotten anybody. But as I was reading the review, and I like exegeted the review, like I like picked it apart. I was like, I showed it to several friends. I was like, there's no way the person who read this was a person of color. If they were, I would be so surprised. Because one of the things that they kind of listed some of my stories like a laundry list of subpar trauma. And like I said to y'all, like this wasn't a book to like act like I was having these terrible experiences. This was a book about a nuanced view of microaggressions. And so the fact that they listed them out like it was nothing was actually really painful for me to read. And then of course they didn't like my exegesis, kind of I think that they did like that I didn't reference other voices, reference where my you know what I mean? And like, again, my spirit assignment was intuition and like trusting that. And every time I hear from a brown woman, a Black woman who's read it, they're like, yeah. I mean, obviously, maybe people aren't going to tell me it sucks, but like,
no, it does not.
Well,
it does not.
You don't know me. You don't know me. I would have.
Okay.
I would have. If you check around, you would know that I would be the one who would tell you that.
Okay.
But but I have to tell you, as far as the references go, Kim, I'd love to talk about this for a second because I think that is really powerful. Because as somebody, I end up unknowingly putting myself in really academic circles that I have imposter syndrome because I'm not an academic, I'm not a scholar, and I end up on panels at religious conferences. I'm like, I don't go to church. I don't want to be here. This is not for me. And then I feel this pull that I need to have all of these things and I need to be able to quote all of these people. So I legitimize myself. What I loved about your book was the fact that you didn't do that, and you don't have to, because your experience alone is yours and it's valid. And P.S., I did relate to it because death by 1,000 cuts is a real thing. Yeah. Like that does happen, and that's what microaggressions are. And as I grew up with white people and heard jokes about my hair or my skin tone, oh look, my mom is darker as you in summertime. All kinds of things they wear on and they wear you down. And I would bet that reviewer was white, because anybody who's Black or brown knows that microaggressions can be harmful. And as a punch in the face, but it doesn't mean over time it doesn't end up killing us the same way.
Exactly. And thank you so much for saying all of that, because I feel like I feel seen, But yeah, I mean, it was just like, it was such an intentional move on my part. And the fact that the book got published is just the cherry on top, because this project really was just my own like inner work and inner healing, assignment that I, as an academic, as a theologian, I know how to speak that language. I have plenty of articles out there that are super academic, and I know how to do that. And everything in me, as I'm writing anything, a sermon, a book, whatever, everything in me wants to turn to the side for permission. So this book was like, no, I'm not doing that. And I don't know why they published it, but they did. So it's like, okay, I said in my book proposal, like, here are all my degrees. Here's all my achievements that give me permission to speak. And I am saying, no, I'm pushing all that aside. And I'm just speaking from, my brown woman's voice and my experience, and offering some balance to theology, because like in theological world, in church world, they lift up the Bible, they lift up tradition, they lift up reason. And they say that experience is also a part of that. There's this whole like model about it, but actually no to experience, because we can't mass manipulate you if you share your experience. People on the margins can't make any changes if we let experience, define or interpret theology. And so for me, I was offering balance to what's been so imbalanced for so long.
I'm reading I had to look it up. I had to go look up the Publisher's Weekly Review while I was talking to you because I was curious.
It's really bad. Like I've read a lot of their reviews. I read a lot of their reviews, and it was like really not nice. They literally start out, what's the first line? What's the first line?
I think it's because, I think you said it well, they don't get it. It just says that it does say a disappointing debut. I just read that.
First line.
But, and y'all, the thing is like you said, I don't think they understood it because it's almost like whoever read it got offended by you accounting your own history and growing up. It's like they were offended, like, oh, you're so traumatized by all these occurrences. That's how they read it. But what was also interesting, and one of the favorite things that I liked, is that they were like, they put a line in there that you urge readers to, it says, Pratt warns against the dangers of productivity culture and hierarchical thinking, and urges readers, thank you, to instead embodies one's child self and divine feminine. But I loved that you tell us to encourage us.
Sandwich that in there like it was like basic.
Yo, can we just talk about
child self and divine feminine? That's such a part of of healing. I mean, you bring it all in there. It's like, bring in the child self, bring in the divine, the divine feminine. Let's break down the color barriers. Let's talk about how you only see it one way or another. Let's talk about what our grandparents, I love that you talk, remember who you are, like you said, in your, in your shame area too, especially, remember who you are that your grandmother taught you. You were like, all of this is who we are, and like our whole belief into Motherland, it's like, we are our ancestors. We are making that difference. We are making the change. Our viewpoint is part of that. And it's like, we have to break that down. We have to talk about these walls that it's like, here's your box. There you go. Stay in your box. You're safe for us if you stay in your box, but you're not safe for us if you come out of your box. But like you said, when you kindly come out of the box, and if you want to talk about God, it's like, you're going to understand that divinity in a whole different way and expansion than, here's your little box. Go ahead and stay in that safety.
A word.
Yeah, grind culture is rooted in white supremacy. Like, I'm going to come out and say it. It is. It's rooted in capitalism, which is rooted in anti-Blackness, which is rooted in white supremacy. Like, it really is. And I think that does take us away from God. However you want to define God for yourself, I think it does. But I think I do appreciate you talking about it and putting it in this Christian framework. My partner talks a lot about who Jesus really was versus the Jesus like in the Bible. And I really appreciate so much of when I was listening to your book, I was like, oh my gosh, this is what Andrea is always talking about. Like who people think Jesus was. Like Jesus, Jesus would be in jail right now, like
Jesus was very radical.
Very radical.
Yeah.
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we hear you great.
Oh, sweet. I'm so sorry for the Filipino time.
It's totally. I totally understand.
I didn't hear my 10 alarms. I'm so sorry. I didn't hear any of your phone calls. I read your book yesterday, though. Holy shit. So good. So many things stood out to me, and I'm sure you guys already discussed a lot of it. Being Filipino Mexican, I definitely vibed with that. And then you started with your grandmother, which my grandmother was my queen, all the way to your mom leaving. Like, even though it was a snippet, I like broke down. I was like, what is wrong with me? I was like, I'm healing through your book. And I listened to a few of your podcasts. Just overall, I'm like, how do you have time? That was my biggest question. And you addressed a lot. In essence, you wrote almost like a card deck. It was pick a card, pick a topic. She wrote about it, right? So that sucks that you had a bad review, but whatever. She's thriving. With you being a pastor right now, and you opened up your church about 10 years ago, that's beautiful enough. What is the main thing you go to daily? This is just a ritual question that you go to center yourself in the do I say it right? Imago Dei?
Imago Dei, yeah.
Imago Dei. What is like the first thing you go to now, since your world is, plus having a daughter, it's so busy?
I always say my most consistent spiritual practice is watching the sunrise. And I'm lucky. I can see the sunrise from my backyard. I can see it if I'm sitting at my couch or my dining table, which are kind of in the same space. I can see the sunrise. And so I'm a morning person, which I'm guessing at least two of you. No, you get, this is sacrifice and love.
Yeah. I usually am. So I was like, what is Spirit trying to tell me? So I was like, I'm gonna ask her how she is when she's busy.
Yeah, I would try to watch the sunrise every day, and if I don't intentionally sit there and just stare at it, then I always kind of acknowledge it if I'm walking by, or a lot of times getting my kid off to school. But it took me like 2 years to realize, oh, that's a spiritual practice. Like I didn't realize, but when I looked back, I realized it. And then I actually wrote my book like in the mornings before everyone woke up at my kitchen table. Instead, this is my office that I'm in my garage, but I actually took my laptop and wrote so I could see the sunrise. So it kind of joined me in all 4 seasons.
Oh, so beautiful.
Yeah.
I think that's a big reason why Motherland exists, and is because we're trying to tell the people, whoever's our audience listening, it's like spirituality doesn't have to be one way, right? Like from religion to spiritual growth. I think even nowadays you have to, if you're spiritual, you have to feel and look like this, right? It's like becoming a religion. And I think we're trying to bring us all the way back to our ancestors and be like, allow yourself to find joy. And when you find joy, that's your name. That's what you will find the light. That truly is your name. Aurelia
Golden light. Yep.
That's crazy. Anyway, I just really love your book, and I hope there's many more to come because, well, there is many more to come. I can see the future. There's about 4 more to come, so can't wait for that to happen.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. How does that feel just hearing that? Are you like,
it's like, I want to, I loved the writing and the actual publishing and marketing and all that really sucked out my soul.
Yeah.
That was, I'm still recovering, and it's so weird because how did I do the podcast, write the book, do my job, parent? How did I do all of that and manage it? I was able to, but then after the fact, it all hit me. And now I'm like, we haven't been recording. I'm not writing a book. Like I'm just doing my normal stuff, and it's been feeling pretty tough.
Yeah.
So I've been trying to just make space for resting and recovering and not rush anything. But I definitely have ideas, and I just jot them down and trust that they'll be born in the right time.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Speaking of a rest day, can you talk to a little bit more about the idea of taking one Sunday off a month? Because I thought that would be powerful for a pastor to talk about. I was like, whoa, really, I was like, okay.
Yeah. We have the blessing and burden of not having any money. When you don't have money, you have more freedom. And especially in an organization. I mean, my husband, he's in the tech world, so I do not suffer. Like I'm very privileged and financially secure and that. But like the organization of our church, like we, as a whole, like we don't have any money because we're not a mass mega church, and we're preaching things like when you let go of shame and guilt, you actually don't come to church as much.
Yep.
Turns out. So we're small, and we believe in the community we're building, and we get tired because it's a lot for a small group of people to carry. So when this was before the pandemic, we were like, we're tired, and how can we make this sustainable? And the first thing we said was, we cannot compare ourselves to other churches. We can't look at the formula and copy and paste it, what works for us. And we brainstormed, and we were like, if we just had a Sunday off, because it is a production. In our community, we would like put this whole thing together, this whole pitch. And this is my co-pastors at the time. And we were so worried, like people were going to freak out, and everyone was just like, okay. And everyone loves it. Like, it's great. It's just a reset for all of us. And you know what? When you have kids, like, they have stuff on the weekends.
Yes.
Like young families and our kids have stuff, and then on Sundays we've got church, and we're all exhausted, and no.
Yep.
But at the same time, we still value sacred community and formation and like that camaraderie for ourselves and our kids. And Sunday morning's kind of a built-in natural space, so we don't totally reject it, but we do take a rest once a month.
Amazing.
Yeah.
In the book, like you were talking a little bit, I want to piggyback a little bit on to what Mal was saying. And you talk about how like we have to learn to listen to our spirit. We have to learn to trust it, and we have to become the people that are paying attention. Can you tell us a little bit about like you and how you learned to do that for yourself in a way?
Yeah. Actually, I was listening to y'all's first episode. Someone said this, and I was like, yes, exactly. Oh, I even made a note in my phone. Wait, I actually really did. Like, hold on. I got it. Oh, no. It was about intuition and embodiment. Because for me, like, okay, I wrote this down after listening to your first episode. Our bodies are the entry point to our intuition. Your body is more important than religion. Your body is more sacred than religion. For Christians, the binary of bodies bad versus spirit good has been so detrimental to our intuition, because we've been told like, we basically like our bodies are bad. The spirit is good, but the spirit like then you go into, okay, I'm bad, God is good. What's God and what's me? And then the pastor tells you what God is based on their interpretation, and which is stupid because it's like it's just dumb, right?
Right.
I'm like, okay, no, we have to get back to our bodies being good so that we can listen to our bodies. And obviously, I mean, it's obvious now, and it'll be obvious to you all in your lines of work, but when your body tells you everything you need to know, I mean, it really does. And when you just listen to your body's cues, your intuition just gets cultivated, and it's just a no-brainer. I mean, I wrote my book like one day I had a Zoom meeting 30 minutes before, and I thought I should prepare. That's, my brain, my body's like, you need to go take a bath. Like, I just felt like you have to go take a bath. And I'm like, that's a weird feeling.
Yeah.
You just go do it. And it was like, I was so grounded in that meeting and relaxed and could think better. And it's like, how do you get to that point of listening, of hearing your body say, go take a bath 30 minutes before a meeting? Well, you just like baby steps, one by one, listen to your body, and it's like it'll speak more clearly and loudly the more you listen to it. And to me, that's the entry point to intuition.
Yeah, I love that.
What have you found that people say about that? Like, do you find that when you're talking about that as a pastor, that people look at you a little funny, like, why are you talking about intuition?
No, not in my community, because I've been there 10 years and we've all evolved together. Like, I didn't start the church, just me starting this church as I am now. I started it, I kind of fell into it with a group of people, and we all evolved theologically, and people left and people came, and over and over and over for 10 years. And so, but over time, like, everyone says Imago Dei in my community, and they always look at me like, like, because it's like, I talk about it in every sermon, and I like, you can't, to me, like, intuition is such a part of that message of being made in the image of God. Like, you're allowed to trust yourself. The big Christian thing is like, your heart is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. And that's what that's the indoctrination so many of us have received. And so to hear the message, like, your body is good and you can listen to your intuition, like, people love that. And people in my community are ready to hear that. People outside at other places, they think I'm like the devil or whatever.
Right. Right.
I don't care.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for saying that. Like, I think that's one of the things that, being and working with people that have had, I work with a lot of people that have had religious trauma from various religions. And the thing is, and even in the sense that I go back and I look at my own upbringing and the sermons that, I would teach, in the sense of like, how unworthy we were, or how unworthy we are as an individual. And then, we sit there and we're singing these praise songs, nothing wrong with that, but like in the sense of like, I'm this not worthy person. And it's like to come through and to reprogram and re-listen to yourself as, no, because you are worthy is why all of this is, because you're absolutely, amazing and you're created in this image. It's quite the opposite, I feel, of what so many of us teach or have been taught, and not teach, but have been taught. And so I love that you bring that up a lot, because it does come back into our sense of self. And I think that was the scary part for so much, is that when you have the understanding that it really does come back to your sense of self, that within you, not outside of you. And I think that scared a lot of people,
It does. It is that, again, it's that dualistic tendency. Like, people don't know how to fathom, like, it has to be like God good, me bad. Like it has to be like this opposites thing or something, this dualistic thing. And people don't know how. It's not that they're not capable of it. It's just that there's nothing in their paradigm that leaves room for that. And it does feel really wrong and bad and all that to people. So it is a big jump, and I know I freak people out, but like, if people just listen, give it a chance. In fact, I did try to write this book to people who as a kind of introductory book for engaging some of these ideas. And I tried to write very compassionately so as not to, like, polarize anybody, but while also being honest. So take it for what it's worth.
I as somebody who did not grow up in with a religion, I found this book very accessible and comforting. And like, I'm even saying this with like a lump in my throat, that like, I feel this sense of comfort from God even reading it. Who didn't grow up with the definition, or who was told specifically that there was no God, and that I was wrong in thinking that there was. But this feels very approachable in the way that it just makes sense. Like it feels like it just makes sense. Like this isn't like made up. This feels right in my body as I was listening to it. And I think that's incredibly powerful and empowering. I felt agency of the ability to follow faith when I was listening.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Wow. I'm so encouraged. I'm glad this is recorded. I can go back and listen to this encouragement.
Yeah, you know what? That's right.
It's just amazing. Thank you again so much, because I worked my ass off and I kind of felt like everyone who bought the book knew me somehow. I was like, I wonder if anyone read this that doesn't know me. So
the word will.
Yeah, it's exciting to hear. And to hear three very different perspectives. I mean, all three of you have a very different existence in the world. And so it's really cool. This is like amazing.
When did you write the book? Like, what year did this come out?
Last year. September.
Last year? Okay.
Yeah. Last fall.
Just wondered, because you said it and I was like, it's just now, like, people will know. I'm listening to you talk and I'm like, okay, when did she write this book? Because I can just feel it. I'm like, no, it's getting out there. You wrote it. You're like the entry point, right? The start before everybody was.
It's like, weird because when you write a book, if you ever need to talk about that process, like on the side, let me know, because
I will be reaching out. I'm in the middle now.
I feel like I learned a lot. My eyes have been opened, and I met a lot of people that are helpful. But anyways, it feels like an ending when the book comes out, because you've spent all these sacred moments preparing and writing, and so then you put it out in the world, and there's this big around the launch and everything, and then it feels over, even though its life as a book is just beginning.
Yeah, I definitely think that's definitely, because I mean, I didn't write with a publisher, but I self-published my book, and I know that, you know, and I had a big, it came out, it you know, did its bestseller list and all that stuff, and then I'm like, everybody's like, when's the next book? And I love how you were mentioning, like, yeah, you kind of just, the ideas come and I put them to the side, but it's like, I need time to kind of, after it comes out, to be like, FYI, Oneika, right? Like, I'm just going to shut. It's like, all right, I'm not in that part yet. Yeah, I want to know one of the things, and I love that you bring it up, right? Remember who you are. You talk about your grandmother in the book. I would love if you could share just that, to share her with us and tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I talk about her a lot, and begin with her, end with her, talk about her throughout. You know, my family would want everyone to know, like, she was not perfect at all. And I tried to say that in the book. Like, she's really not, like, I'm not trying to idolize her, because she was, you know, the result of a lot of her very traumatic experiences. And like, my auntie told me, she was like, yeah, like, it was funny how you said the remember where you came from thing as like an empowering thing. Cause I felt like she always said this to me, like, remember where you came from, therefore you're not going to accomplish that.
Right.
Like,
right. Good luck,
so like, I like when honoring her, I really like to in these conversations bring in some of the real talk about who she was, and yeah, she was like our matriarch, you know, and so I want to give her respect, and I wanted to pay tribute to her life in some way, even if she was here or is here laughing at it, like laughing at me trying to be poetic and all that. You know, so it is another paradox of like, I don't know. I think she would have secretly loved it, or secretly loves it. And she also has to laugh at it a little bit. But she was, I don't want to say was, like, she is so feisty and fiery and honestly kind of mean.
Really,
I just loved her. I love her so much. And I wrote in the book, but I feel like sometimes I watch my kid and I'm like, wow, it's like a healed version of her.
Right.
What's going to happen? This is dangerous.
Right. Now it's even more powerful.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What do you think she would say with everything in the work that you're doing now? Not, you know, not only like you as a pastor, but the other part of it too, with just bringing awareness to everything out there.
She would just say, "Get where you came from. Like, don't think you're so good." Don't feel she would. You know, my first ever sermon that I preached at our church, she came. My whole family came to like hear me preach. And she fell asleep.
I'm dying.
And this is not like, we pride ourselves on short sermons. Like, this is not a lot. This is like a 18-minute sermon. Like,
hilarious.
This is not long. And I'm like so nervous. This is 10 years ago. Like, I'm really nervous, and I'm like preaching, and my grandma's like,
I cannot.
I was like, Grandma, why did you fall asleep in the sermon? Like, not even in the service, just in the sermon. She was like, it was just this like really relaxing. Like,
she's like, I trust you. It was great. It was great.
That is hilarious. I love that.
So she loved to like just keep the people around her humble.
Yeah, completely. You know,
that's a tradition though of, I think, Black and brown folks as also a way of protection from the world, you know, like my dad used to sometimes even say to me like, oh, don't brag. And I don't think I always knew he was proud of me, but it's almost like they are afraid of And it's almost like they don't know. It's unconscious. We don't want other like whiteness to hurt you. So if we keep you here, we keep you sort of safe in a strange way.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. I agree. And I do think part of our healed versions of our parents, grandparents, ancestors, I think we're in this place in life and time where we're like being unapologetic with our pride and you know, with our confidence, and it feels like wrong because we don't have a blueprint in our families of feeling like safety in that. But also feels like a part of our healing and their healing to like lean into that anyway. So
yeah.
We're
just born into this generation really is what you just said. It's like everything our grandmas couldn't do, we're about to do, or we are doing. And I really, I look at my nieces and nephews and my daughters and I go, damn, y'all are lucky. We have just paved this way for you. Like their generation is, I can do anything. And mom and dad say yes. Like it's,
I know
everything we were craving, but I mean, lessons learned to teach, right? From the generations, such healing through that lineage, through our lineages. I just go back to your grandma because I can resonate with that so much, because even the energy of my grandma, when I speak about it, like, she's such a graceful queen. I'm like, yeah, she was like Mother Mary for sure. But she also had a mouth, right? And it was like, and I think that's what keeps me grounded in this day and age with my spirituality. It was like, you have a gift, we all have gifts, and if you use it, you better help. And if you're not helping, you better shut your mouth. It was like, straight up, yes, grandma.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
that makes sense. But it's the way they do it is hilarious because they're small.
I loved, like, my grandma. She always was getting into stuff. But one time she went to this. It was like a Christian-owned thrift store, and they had a drop off, like a room where you could just drop stuff off to donate if they weren't open yet. One day she goes over there and they're not open yet, but they're there. They're just not open yet. It's like, 7:30 or something in the morning. She goes in there to drop off some clothes because her husband had died. And she got in there. I was like, you know what? Like, I'm just going to make a trade. Like, I'm going to like drop this stuff off. And I'm going to take a few of these things that look like nice or whatever. So she's like taking stuff. And the people see, because they have a camera in there, and they're there. So they come out of the building, and they're like, kind of confront her, but she's also elderly, so they're like nice about it. She pretends to fall.
No.
And then they're like, oh, are you okay? And she's like, it's fine. And she's telling me this story, and I'm like, Grandma, why did you do this? Like, why did you have to take something? And she's like, what? I'm giving them something. I'm gonna take this. Like, it's a trade. And
I love it.
And I think about all the little ways she made mischief, and it felt like it was funny, and we tell about stories about it, but it also felt like a form of resistance. Like, in some ways, the part of me that's such a rule follower is able to get out of that, because I think about the ways that she broke the rules and tested the rules. Right. And it was just like in her DNA to like, that was how you live, there are no other options.
Survival.
Unless you stay in these oppressive systems of, the rules in her mind, you know what I mean? So I just love that model of like, even if it's right or wrong, we're going to consider it. And what is it?
Oh my gosh.
Those are the memories, right? Those are the memories. It's I'm sure when you're a little girl that you were mortified, but as an adult, it's hilarious, right?
Yeah. She scared me.
Yeah. You're like, don't say anything. Don't say anything.
Yeah. My grandfather scared me, and he was a perfect rule breaker when I was, like he was a union organizer and a communist and a Panther. Like, he was a professional rabble rouser. But I remember when I was about 8 or 9 with my cousin, and we wanted to go to McDonald's because he lived in a bad neighborhood, and they built a McDonald's on every corner. And we as kids, you're excited. You're like, yes, McDonald's in the backyard. Yep. And before we left, though, he said we couldn't go until we answered a question. And he wanted to know if he said, I have to answer, one of you has to answer a question. So my cousin pushes me forward or like step back. So I'm standing there like an idiot and he's looking down on me. He seemed so big. He was only like 5'9", but he seemed like 8 feet tall. And he said, can Africans understand music, classical music? And I was 8 and I was like, no. And then he screams, music is universal. Of course, everybody can understand music. And I was like, can I just go get some ice cream? And there are these lessons that we get from our grandparents that seem terrifying at the time, and we can look back and laugh on them. But that wisdom, I think, is inside us, and I think it's just it's so powerful.
Yeah.
No matter how no matter how it comes about.
Totally.
We don't have to sanitize it.
Well, especially with our grandparents, we have the generational gap where we weren't as impacted by the trauma. So we can kind of look upon them with compassion and a distance. And also they learned a lot and they experienced life, and then they were able to grandparent in a way that maybe was different than how they parented. And
exactly.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I'm like listening to you guys, and it's funny because like I was raised by my grandfather. Well, I had a step grandmother, but I called her grandma. That's all I knew. But I was really raised by them and living with them in a way. So it's like it's kind of interesting because I'm listening to your stories and I was like, I did not have like. My grandfather was so different. I mean, for one, it wasn't my grandma, but it was my grandfather because my grandmother died years ago, and my grandfather just recently died in the last year. But who sticks out to me most in my childhood. And it's like, I don't feel I got any softness from because being still raised under his roof, and in his home, it was like, no, I still got the same person my mother got.
Yes.
But the one thing is, and I love it because I'm listening to your story about your grandmother and getting the clothes, is that my grandfather, it was kind of like they had, and maybe it was like, I wonder if it's just that generation where it was like, tell me no. Tell me I can't do this, it was like they just did what they wanted and nobody said anything. It was like, okay, my grandpa, he's like, Grandpa, you can't do that. Why not? Because it was like,
I love it.
Done.
I took it to mean when I get to be old, I earn the right to do whatever I want.
Right. Right.
Yep.
I love that.
Just one little funny story before we move on, because you're bringing up so many memories. We would go to the buffet, right, and take after church with my grandma, and she would bring out Tupperware from her big ass purse, and I'm like, Grandma. She's like, yes, we paid this. Oh my God.
Yes.
But those mortifying experiences, I can feel through your book, I think, is what we're trying to get to. You're so relatable, and your audience, I'm sure will just take to it. In my head, when I read your book yesterday, the whole thing, I couldn't put it down. I was like, holy shit, this is really good. It was 4 hours. It took me 4 hours. And I was like, this was amazing. I was like, every time someone asks about my podcast, I'm just going to send them your book. That's what I said. Because it's such a preface to what we do. It's we're just talking about our own story. Whether you agree with it or not, just listen. So thank you for writing that. It's so beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for the encouragement again, y'all. I have got to go soon because I have to drive an hour for my kids' field trip. But I just want to say, thank you. I'm just sad because I feel like I could talk to y'all forever.
You'll be back.
Yeah.
And y'all.
Go ahead. Go ahead. No.
I was just gonna say, my podcast co-host is Brittany. Y'all have got to connect with her because she's just like me. We went to the same seminary. We're both ordained clergy. She's a preaching pastor at our church, but she is also a Reiki practitioner, a holographic sound healer. She's a dream worker. There's just so many ways that when I was listening to you all share your stories in the first episode, I was like, no, they don't need to have me on. They need to have Brittany on.
We needed you and we need Brittany, but
y'all have got to, just if you go to my Instagram and click on the podcast, you can find her pages through that. or I can connect y'all. But like, I was like, y'all have to meet.
Oh yeah, we follow Brittany, and y'all met in London. I was like, we like her too, and I was like,
wait, did you listen to a podcast episode?
I've been listening to all your stuff all week. I was like, Brittany's voice is so soft. I was like,
she's the best. She's the best voice. Yeah.
Isabel was our too, so thank you, Isabel.
Yeah,
I was obsessed. I read this and I was like, oh my goodness, oh my, like it was literally a brown girl's epiphany for me in every moment. Like
truly,
I was just like, duh. I was like, you guys have to read this book. I cannot wait to have her on. Before we leave, I want before you go, because I know you need to go, tell us how people can find you, and then also something you would love just the listeners to know.
How to find me at Rev Aurelia Joy on Instagram. And that's my handle everywhere. It's even my website, revaureliajoy.com, I think. I did make it, but yeah, I want people to know. I just, like I say in the book, like you're made in the image of God, Spirit of God dwells within you, and you don't need anybody else's permission to navigate, the things of faith or spirituality. You can, forge your own path.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And everybody buy her book.
Yes. And review it. Listen, you don't have to buy it from Amazon, but you need to review it on Amazon.
Okay. I will actually make sure to do that today.
Yeah. That helps the authors a lot. Yeah. The publisher looks at that.
Okay.
Stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah. And Amazon, like, whatever.
All right.
Well, thank you so much.
This was a gift. Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll see you real soon.
Thank you. I'm going to sign off, and good luck with your next episode.
All right. Bye.
Bye.